I was looking forward to a new 3D platformer. I really liked Super Mario Galaxy and Super Mario 3D World, so I saw this one and figured, hey, let's give it a try. It actually kind of looks similar. I liked the aesthetic of it. I liked the smooth textures and frankly the way that everything looked like it was made out of cake frosting or something like that. And that's what drew me to this, was especially the visual style. So, as is my habit, I got the physical edition whenever possible. I do like to buy physical, like to keep my games long term, and I fired it up, gave it a try. Initial impressions were that it was kind of hard to control. You'd spend a lot of time moving across platforms and jumping from one to another, and the jumping is different from all of the other platformers that I've played, especially Mario. You don't jump when you press the button, you jump when you release the button, which takes some adjustment. And depending how long you hold the button, you'll jump higher or you'll jump really shallow. And I can't even count the number of times that my muscle memory took over from years and years of platforming, and instead of jumping where I intended, I just nosedived right off a platform. Frankly, that happened over and over and over, and it started making me a very cautious player. Usually I'm willing to just blast through levels and go as quick as I can and have a lot of fun with it, and this made me very cautious and slow, which in turn made me fall off even more often. I was kind of frustrated because every other platformer that I've played before used the same sort of muscle memory. This one, not so much. The argument could be made that it's new and different and fresh, or it could be made that it's unintuitive. I think that's more a matter of opinion. When I was trying to decide whether or not to buy this, a lot of the reviews that I looked at mentioned how you burrow instead of stand on the platforms, and that's supposed to be a rather new and unique thing. But I didn't find it to be especially unique. It plays very much like you are still standing on a platform. Yeah, I mean, you'll duck under some obstacles that way, but in the other platformers I play, usually there's a duck option that does the exact same thing. There is one fun mechanic that I really did enjoy, it felt different, was that as soon as you dive into the ground, you have the option to boost right away if you like. And so you can pick up a lot of speed and you can start really racing through the levels, and it feels like a much better set of movement options once you start doing that. Usually I ended up doing that after failing repeatedly on a level and getting really frustrated and just throwing caution to the wind. The funny part here is that when I did that and I got less cautious, I had a lot more fun with this game. I'd say the best moments were when I was just going as fast as I could and hoping that that next jump made it to the next platform. That actually was probably a highlight of the game for me. And this game overall plays like a series of obstacle courses. You know, I made the comparison, and a lot of people like to make this comparison, that it's similar to Super Mario 3D World, or for me, the Trials levels in Super Mario Galaxy. And I think that's a very fair comparison because there's basically no enemies to defeat. There's nobody to fight in this game. It's a rather long-winded and varied obstacle course. Even the so-called boss battles are really a boss standing on a platform far away and throwing obstacles at you for you to jump over or dodge or try to get to a button to press. So for that reason, I would say that this sits a little bit more on the cozy side of 3D platforming. You've got a timer, but you could very easily just take your time on the levels and go whatever speed you want. Let the timer count up for forever. Unlike, say, other 3D platformers that have a countdown timer, where if you run out of time, you're done for. There's a couple levels where you're chased by something and you cannot go slow on it. Those kind of mix it up. I found that enjoyable. But there's not a lot of checkpoints, and if you're lucky, there's one checkpoint per level. So you get most of the way through the level, you fall off the platform, yeah, you're going to go back quite a ways. I spent a lot of time redoing the same portions of levels over and over and over. And that started to wear out because the levels, even though they have different looks to them, they all play very, very similar, just in general. There's a gimmick here or a gimmick there, like disappearing platforms or like lava flows, or maybe a spinning type of platform with something that maybe sweeps at you and you have to jump over it. But ultimately it all feels like very similar obstacle courses, and you could almost switch the level themes and not have any difference in the gameplay. I do want to talk about the Overworld Hub. This is where you select your levels, and there's not a lot of clarity as to exactly where you're supposed to go next. You can kind of pick and choose and take on one level from one area and then go and do a different one. There are times where it'll point you to another cannon and say, hey, go over there for a second, but there was a number of times I got confused as to where it was telling me to go next, only to find out I had to talk to a character who previously didn't want to talk to me. And these characters, you know, I like Multi-Mole. He's cool, he's kind of fun. But these other characters in here kind of weird me out a bit. They're somewhere in between like Banjo-Kazooie, maybe some Animal Crossing influence in there, or dare I say, Disney's Country Bears. If we've got any Country Bears fans in here, I'm sorry. Anyways, here's a boss battle that I played over and over and over. Minor spoilers, you get to fight this guy several times, and not much changes each time. He just comes back with a little bit more moving platforms, or he shoots more of the spiky balls at you. Why is he in a UFO? Why is it an airship? Why is he shooting the spiky balls? Why is he stealing the electricity from our town? None of it really gets explained. It just kind of is what it is. And I'm down with lack of explanation sometimes if it fits the vibe. I don't know if this fit the vibe, though. For me, it was a miss. I have to deliver mail to get electricity back so that I can use the cannons so that we can have a party in the town. But along the way, someone comes to steal our electricity. So I have to stop him from stealing the electricity, and then I can go and deliver the mail to an empty mailbox out in the middle of nowhere. Not to a person, mind you, just an empty mailbox somewhere, and then we get electricity. And then out of nowhere, the real bad guy kind of shows up, and I won't spoil exactly what that is, but the twist is not something that I found very satisfying. I would say that this game is plenty long. It has lots of levels to keep you entertained. If you're enjoying the levels, then you're going to have plenty here to choose from. If you're not enjoying the levels and they're starting to feel samey, then there's too much. There is a bit of a collecting and unlockables aspect to this game too, where you can collect the carrots and you can collect the turnips and use them to purchase accessories. It doesn't change the game really at all. It lets you buy hats and masks and things like that that Multi-Mole can wear. Now, think for a second, where does Multi-Mole spend most of his time? Under the ground. In fact, most of the times when I get to see him, it's at the end of the level when I've delivered the mail. He pops out for a second and I get to see him frozen in midair. That's about the only time I get a real good look at Multi-Mole. The rest of the time it's pretty brief and pretty zoomed back. So no matter what hat he's wearing, I'm mostly going to see it at the end of the level. It seemed like a bit of an oversight. I wish I could have enjoyed him wearing the outfits more during the levels. For that reason, I wasn't too excited to do all the unlockables. I started to unlock a handful of them and then realized I was not getting to enjoy them, so I just skipped it and I focused on trying to beat the game. That was tougher than I expected. It's not an easy game, and many times I jumped off the same ledge over and over and over, and I worked very hard not to jump off that same ledge, but, well, muscle memory took over, repeatedly. I spent a good handful of hours trying to beat this game, and I did eventually beat it, but afterwards I had no desire to return to it again. Once was plenty, and I'd say it was worth playing once. Something else that impacts me greatly when I'm trying to enjoy a game is if there's a lot of waiting time or if there's some kind of delays that are unnecessary. And there's a lot of loading times in this game. You load in between levels. You load getting back to the hub world. And it even crashed on me one time. Like the game just totally quit out and I had to load back in. I seem to remember some unskippable animations or something too. I've quit out on games in the past because there were too many loading screens or too many delays in between opportunities to play. Things like Chris Tales had me loading every single screen that I walked through, and that drove me absolutely insane. I didn't finish that game. This one didn't reach anywhere near that level, but it still felt like the waiting was kind of excessive given how much of the level there really was to load. And I gotta interrupt my thought process for a second. You've got these floating ball things shooting at you, and I'm wondering how in the world they hit Multi-Mole when he's under the ground and they're above the ground. Anyways, just think about that one for a sec. Getting back to it though, when I'm thinking about scoring these games, I think about what was out at the time, what preceded this game, and how it holds up to its competition in that genre. So games that recently had preceded it, 2017 we had Super Mario Odyssey, which was absolutely outstanding. We had Super Mario 3D World back in 2021. Great port from the Wii U that got released, and it came with Bowser's Fury. There was hours upon hours of content in that. I mentioned 2007 Super Mario Galaxy and then 2010 Super Mario Galaxy 2. Both absolutely outstanding games, the kind of games that you want to copy the best things from. But I would suggest that this game did a really good job of copying the least important platforming aspects from Super Mario, and sadly, leaving the most important stuff on the table. You can tell some of these level design ideas came straight out of the Mario series. But with no real enemies to spice things up, you're relying on the level design to give all the character. And I would ask you, what do all of these strange traps and things have to do with delivering mail? If you're not sure, that makes two of us. Do the owners of the mailboxes really want to keep everybody out? Because I don't see anybody else who's trying to get in. Is this the usual mail route? This is how all the mail is delivered to all of these different places? Because I would not want to work as a postal worker, not in this world. So the way that the story relates to the gameplay is far less carefully considered than the other games that I mentioned that this would have to compete with. The play control and the level design don't have enough that differentiate it from the other entries that it would have to compete with to be outstanding. Ultimately being very slim on characters and the fact that the character I'm playing as spends the majority of his time underneath the dirt where I can't see him doesn't help a whole lot either. My opinion is that it's an okay platformer. It really doesn't take any risks. It doesn't tread any new ground. There's so many other games that do something better than this did in at least one area that you could probably put this towards the end of your backlog and play it if you get around to it. But I really think there's a lot of better options out there. Games with better story, games with better controls, games with better level design, games with a more complex gameplay loop, games with more likable characters. So for that reason, this game gets a 2-star below average rating from me, and you may disagree. That's perfectly fine. My ratings are highly subjective, and this was my own personal enjoyment. But I would challenge you. Go grab Super Mario Odyssey and play that, and then jump onto this, and tell me how big the gap you think there is between the two of them. Especially considering Super Mario Odyssey was 4 years old by the time that this got released on Switch. Now, I do want to briefly touch on the DLC. I opened that up after I completed the main game here, and I didn't finish the DLC. Reason being, it played exactly the same. The story here is that there's some kind of VR glasses that you get to deliver, and then you get to travel through the VR world and do some obstacle courses in wireframe sort of mesh style levels. Sadly, even in VR, everything is still trying to clobber me. In another one of the DLCs, Santa Claus needs you to help deliver presents, so you go present delivering. Just kind of more obstacle course levels. Another one of the DLCs was more Halloween themes, some spooky spook stuff, and there was a lot of challenges in this one. Different rooms that you'd go into to try and beat a challenge and move to the next room. And if you lose, well, you end up going way back to the beginning. I think anyone who didn't find enough challenge in the main game, not me, whoever didn't find enough challenge in the main game will find much more challenge here in this DLC. And that could be a really good selling point for you, that there is a big difficulty spike if you want it. Thanks for listening to my thoughts on Mailmole. After hearing what I liked and what I didn't like about it, if you decide you still want to check it out, I'll put an affiliate link in the description for you. Other than that, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss my upcoming Nintendo Switch game reviews.